in research, particularly with reference to heart. He spent more than 10 years in various leading research institutes across the globe, starting from Singapore to United States of America. He is very good orator, great scientist, and just now he completed a project sponsored by DST Serb. Uh, he published many international research papers with great reputation. So today we are so kind, we are fortunate to have Professor Sankar as the resource person for this session. Actually, relating the climate change with heart is very important aspect today, because after COVID, the heart research get another great importance or attention across the world. So you can utilize his expertise, and you can ask, you can interact. Moreover, he's a very good administrator. He was the former registrar of Madurai Kamaraj University, and he used to help many students to get their postdoc or their postgraduate fellowship across the world. He know how to teach writing the purpose statement, purpose of the statement, and contacting the people, selecting the lab, and so on. So don't restrict yourself only to the lecture. You can use his expertise for overall interaction, not only related to climate change and disease burden, also the career-related questions also you can post. So now I request Professor Shankar to deliver his lecture. So welcome, sir.
Thank you, Professor Chandrasekhar, for this wonderful opportunity to share some of my ideas and thoughts about the climate change and the disease burden. So, a very good afternoon to one and all present offline. So, I'm going to talk about influence of climate change on disease burden. So, actually, the past 2 days you have okay. Yeah. So the past few days you guys are busy and you are hearing a lot about climate change and how it is affecting different aspects of the environment and all those things. So I am going to talk about in a different aspect of the perspective, like climate change, how the climate change is influencing or it is promoting the disease burden. It's just a general talk I'm going to give, because I know very well that because I'm one of the member of this STRIDE program, and so I was there in the selection committee and we selected a broad range of people. So after my talk, you can post your questions. So if you want in detail about anything which I'm talking about, or in general, as Professor Chandrasekhar said, so you can ask your questions and you can clarify. Okay, so yes, so the climate change and human interference. So in this globe or in this world, so the only creature which modifies or meddle with the environment or climate is the human beings, because we are greedy people. Always we want our betterment, because we are selfish. We don't bother about the surroundings. So we are trying to exploit the environment. Say you all know well that, like deforestation. Okay, then the greenhouse gas emission of greenhouse gases by like having a lot of industries, and again lot of vehicles using fossil fuel, and which increases the greenhouse gases and also pollution. So what happens is when you say this is again about this 10 human causes of global warming for 2019. So number one is travel, because we love travel, or most of the people we love travel, and we use the transportation. Most of the transportation will use the fossil fuels, and industrialization, then deforestation, livestock production. Okay, increased livestock production, but again the demand ratio is totally different. Then factory farming, consumerism, overuse of electricity, overfishing, use of aerosols, and inability to change. So by manipulating all these things and by exploiting all these things, or generally by using all these things, we are exploiting the mother nature. So the globe, then they'll say, I'm the stupid, because mankind, we are the stupids because we are using all these sort of things for our betterment, and we are spoiling the environment. So now, because of this, so if you have, or if challenge the mother nature, okay, with all these kind of things, so what they'll do is sometimes the mother nature they'll turn on their remote and they'll cause the extreme environmental changes or calamities or these things. So what happens is, so the consequences, I'm sorry, the consequences of this, again, because of we are using all these things. So there is a global warming, and again you all know that the glaciers are melting away, and again that drought. So many things, the nature. So that's why the mother nature always, okay, like it affect the humankind, because that means, so we are manipulating or using this mother nature, and it is giving back to us in terms of a lot of this bad things or the calamities or other things. So what? Okay. So I'm sorry. Okay. So what is the environmental impact of global climate change? So you all know, I think you might have heard about this from the other speakers, the previous speakers. So carbon cycle process, and the climate change for this cause is the increasing greenhouse gases in atmosphere, initially showed by carbon dioxide trapping in ocean with consequent acidification. So acidification of the ocean, not the water. So the likely negative environmental outcomes of this changes and damages to ocean biodiversity, loss of coral reefs, and deteriorating air quality with conditions favoring ozone production in troposphere, increasing smog, further increase of carbon dioxide and methane gases from permafrost melt in northern hemisphere. The second one is the land temperature or the global temperature that is increasing. So the increasing average temperature with more very warm days, fewer cold days, and increased frequency of severity of heat waves. And this increase in temperature is very common or is very high only during this 20th century compared to the previous ages. So actually I read an article which showed around for 20,000 years they calculated the temperature, and in 20th century only there is a dramatic increase in the temperature, and the causes of this temperature increase is that decreased agricultural yield because of temperature, changes in disease, vector prevalence, with increasing penetration to higher altitudes and latitudes, because now because of this heat, again to keep the warmth, you know very well, and actually a few more people are going to talk about like the vector-borne diseases and how these vectors, especially the mosquitoes. So because they could not tolerate the temperature, they need an optimal temperature for the survival. If the temperature rises, then it will go or it will move on to the other altitudes or latitudes where there is a favorable condition. Then again, because of the increase in heat, the ocean temperature is also increasing, which deeper penetrance of heat, and it affects the wealth of the ocean. And so ocean biome is affected in general. Ocean currents changed with various possible effects on climate control. Then cryosphere, Arctic ice to decrease by 43 to 95% in spring, and non-Arctic glaciers predicted to shrink by between 15% and 55% by end of 21st century. And even the last few weeks, you are hearing the news about the Arctic glaciers, how they are melting out and all those things. So the outcome of this one, or the negative environmental outcome of this change, or the cryosphere, is the sea water level will increase, and decreased salinity in northern hemisphere, affecting currents and amount of water vaporization and loss of Arctic habitat. Then sea level, if the sea, as a consequence of cryosphere effect, if the sea level increases, then the average sea level rise by the year 2100 is 0.52 to 0.98 meters, with the rate during 2081 to 21,000 of 8 to 16 mm per year. So which causes loss of land, arborable and livable lands, because again there will be a lot of salination of the land, so you cannot cultivate anything in the salinated land, and increased storm surges. Again, now we are facing most frequently, and coastal aquifer salinity. That means the salinity will increase. Then hydrology. So increasing sea temperatures that will lead to increasing water vapor from for storms and increased precipitation, and also greater extremities in wet and dry regions and seasons, increasing drought, especially in rural areas. So the outcome of these changes, increased frequency and severity of floods and tropical cyclones, El Nino, southern oscillation dominant in Pacific, monsoon region extended, increased severity and frequency of drought and bushfires. Okay. So I'm mainly focusing on the climate change and health. So actually the climate change again is a global change which affects the environment, the local environment or the micro environment where we are living or where the organisms are living. And when there is a change in the environmental health, obviously or eventually it affects the human health in many ways. So the environmental health and human health are not in one or one in the same. So the infrastructure for linking environmental health and public health is not working as well as it should. Okay. So that is the present scenario. Okay. So what are the impact of climate changes on human health? As you all know, the rising temperature, more extreme weather because of this temperature change and other things, and increasing carbon dioxide levels on other green gases, and rising sea levels. So this will affect, so all these things, because of all these climatic changes, there is an increased air pollution, and again changes in vector ecology, like mosquitoes. Now recently we have a lot of mosquitoes which is coming up. So increasing allergens, again because of change in the climate, like it's raining and then it becomes also a lot of flowering and other things, so that increases allergens. Then water quality impacts, then water and food supply impacts because of the changing climate, and environmental degradation and extreme heat. So severe weather. So if we say air pollution generally will cause asthma and cardiovascular diseases, and changes in vector ecology. So there will be an increase in malaria, dengue, and all other mosquito-borne diseases. Then increasing allergens, again, it will cause respiratory allergies and asthma. Actually, this is a very common slide, but now mostly like the other cardiovascular diseases and cancers are also because of this climate change. There's an increase. Even we are going to see that later. So then water quality impacts. If the water quality is not good, then again there's a chance for increase in cholera, cryptosporidiosis, and other harmful algal blooms. So if there is no water quality and if there is less water supply, again the water and food supply impact, that will lead to malnutrition and diarrheal diseases. So environmental regulation, forced migration, like you have seen most of the people are there going from one place, and civil conflict, and which cause mental impacts. And extreme heat, that heat-related illness and death, and also cardiovascular failure. And severe weather, it called injuries, fatalities, and mental health impacts. So this is the impact of global climate change on human health. Again, what kind of diseases you'll get. So for example, like extreme heat, the hotter days, more extreme and frequent heat waves. So that causes heat-related mortality. Again, you have seen in many places, and mortality increase mainly pre-existing cardiovascular and respiratory diseases, especially in vulnerable populations such as elderly population and children and mentally unwell people. Then extreme weather events like more severe and frequent floods and tropical cyclones. So generally they cause injuries and deaths to the people who are living in that area. In fact, and again, after it's over, then it's prone for infectious diseases like diarrheal diseases, exposed to lot of pollutants and subsequent mental health issues. That increased precipitation, so increased entry of human and animal into waterways and drinking water supplies. So that will cause increased waterborne diseases like typhoid and other waterborne diseases. But then again, increase in temperature. So favoring pathogen proliferation, because the increase in temperature will increase the pathogen, or it will give an optimal condition for the pathogens to proliferate further, and which increased foodborne illness and diarrheal diseases like salmonella, campylobacter, cholera, harmful algal blooms and everything they'll cause. They'll bloom or they grow or proliferate if there is an increase in temperature or the frequent change in the temperature. Then climate changes to vector ecology, increasing proliferation of the vectors, increasing biting activity, and increasing latitude and altitude habitat, because it's spread all over the place. For example, so I hail from Kodaikanal. So when I was a kid, or when I was told when I was going for school, so at that time we never had any mosquitoes in Kodaikanal, but now we have a lot of mosquitoes in Kodaikanal. Okay, so that is again because of the change in climate. So these mosquitoes, they move to the higher altitude like Kodaikanal, and we could see a lot of mosquitoes there. So this would increased exposure infectious with the arboviruses and other vector diseases such as malaria, dengue, yellow fever, Zika, and etc. etc. Then climate-related migration of reservoirs and hosts. So for a lot of many infectious diseases, there are like a lot of animals, either both the domestic animals and also the other animals. They are the reservoirs for many viruses or communicable diseases. So that cause bringing to the closer proximity, increased exposure of population with over immunity to the diseases, drought, crop yields, and altered land availability that leads to malnutrition. Then air pollution, so a lot of pollutants in the air like gases and particulate matters and other things, pollen glands and a lot of other things which cause respiratory tract infections and exacerbation of chronic diseases like cardiovascular diseases, chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases, and asthma. Changes to ocean temperature and acidity, so that is migration and loss of fish stocks. So again, which leads to malnutrition, especially in coastal areas of low-income countries. So if there is a sea level increase, that forced migration and competition for dwindling resources. So conflict between people, mental health that's very common. Health-related problems of climate and for asylum seekers. So, like especially in case of health, There are three major things. One is medical and physical health, like changes in fitness and activity level, heat-related illness, allergies, increased exposure to waterborne and vector-borne illness. And the second one is the mental health. So again, if you have any medical or physical health, definitely stress, anxiety, depression, grief, sense of loss, then strains of social relationship, substance abuse, and post-traumatic stress disorders. All these are all mental health and community health. So within the community where you are living, so there will be an increased interpersonal aggression because of this, either the mental health or the physical health, or increased violence and crime, then increased social instability and decreased community cohesion. So these are all the overall changes, or the health related changes due to. So if you take medical and physical health, so again there are two different types. One is communicable or infectious diseases, or non-communicable diseases. So communicable diseases, again, there are different types. So anthropoonosis, that means through human, between humans. So there are again, there is a direct transmission, that means from human to human, like coughing, or say for example now in coronavirus you're you are wearing a mask because through the body fluid it might spread. And indirect transmission of anthropoonosis, like from human to human through some vectors or vehicles like mosquitoes or mites or something like other insects or some animals. And zoonosis, again, so zoonosis, that is from the animals to the humans. So direct means directly, like by direct contact with the animals, again, the transmission of the communicable diseases. And the indirect transmission is from animals or through other vectors, and that will come and infect the human being. So this is all the different kinds of transmission of communicable diseases. And most of the viral diseases and bacterial diseases are communicable diseases. So for example, if you see this again, different style of bacterial diseases and viral diseases all over the globe. Okay, and again, these diseases are very easily spreaded by all over the world. That is because now the travel is very easy. So like what we are hearing from our grandparents or old people, in my day, international travel was a luxury. You kids have it easy. So now the international travel and air travel is very frequent, and most of the people, they are opting for it. And that is the main cause of the communicable disease spreading. So you all very well that in India, so when initially we had this COVID-19, and most of this COVID-19 patients who came from abroad or through international travel, only we got this, and almost the worldwide spread is because of the international traveling and the huge international travel all over the world. Okay. Then the next one is the non-communicable diseases. That means it won't be transmitted. So mostly like cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, or respiratory diseases, or other non-communicable diseases. Like if you see the air pollution, so the cardiovascular diseases is very common if you have a lot of air pollution, and just household air pollution. Again, the cardiovascular disease is one, and cancer also, and also the chronic respiratory diseases. And ambient air pollution, even in ambient air pollution, there's increased cardiovascular diseases and chronic respiratory diseases. And the other things, other common things what we are using, like say for example, if there's the deficiency in food supply and all those things, again, low diet in foods or other things, and alcohol consumption and other things, smoking, everything will cause the non-communicable diseases. Okay. So generally non-communicable diseases, it will affect the heart. Say for example, air pollution. And another thing is, because the air, again, you have the air pollution, like you have a lot of particulate matters in different sizes, or the so-called nanoparticles. And also diabetes. So diabetes is very common because of the climate change or like excess heat. Because in a human system, we'll have a brown fat or adipose tissue, brown fat. So this brown fat is responsible for maintaining the temperature of our body. So if you have more temperature outside, again, there's no need for, or there's no work for this brown fat, and this will affect the insulin dependency or insulin uptake or insulin secretion in the body. So the increase in temperature or the global increase in the temperature, it increases the diabetic burden all over the world. And you all know very well that air pollution initially it will affect the lungs. That means we generally will have the respiratory diseases. Okay, so the particulate matter, very small particulate matter like 2.5 micrometers. So you all know very well that now most of the people, they are doing nanotechnology and they are using nanoparticles. The reason to use the nanoparticles is to deliver the drugs. Or so generally, if it is a very large chemical or protein or whatever it is, so it will not enter into the cell, because the purpose of the drug is it has to enter into each and every cell to do the or to affect or to block any pathway. So these particles, they do not, so the protein or any other chemicals, synthesized chemicals, they cannot enter, because this our system is really great. The cell membrane or the plasma membrane, again, the transport of molecules is by either two mechanisms. One is by active transport and by passive diffusion. So the active transport, it requires, excuse me, energy, and most of the large molecules, they cannot enter the cell. So how to deliver the drugs? Yes, people have worked out that these are the very good drugs, but only if it enters into the cell. So they started using these nanoparticles, because the nanoparticles, and that too the metal nanoparticles, and they are really heavy in nature. So these particles, without any receptor or anything, just like that, it pierces and it will enter into the cell, or it just like that, it can cross the plasma membrane. So if any drug is combined or conjugated to this small nanoparticles, so we can increase the delivery of the drugs into these individual cells in an organ. Okay, so now the air pollution, it causes a lot of changes in the heart, because see, most of the organs or any other organ, if you take, so they have the dedifferentiation and proliferation capacity. That means to maintain the cellular homeostasis, the cells are keep on proliferating. So the dead cells will go into apoptosis and they'll die. Then to compensate, the new cells will be made by proliferation. Whereas if you take the heart, so the heart is made up of cells called cardiomyocytes. So these cardiomyocytes, they do not have the proliferation capacity or dedifferentiation capacity. So whatever the cells or the number of cells you had immediately after you born, the same number of cells will remain until you die if you don't have any other cardiovascular diseases. Okay, now you can ask a question. Sir, when I was born, I was around 2.5 to 3 kgs, and my heart will be very small size, like a plum or like a small lemon. But now I have grown up and my heart size will be like an apple or bigger than that. So how this is possible? Yes, because the number of cells remains same, whereas the size of the cell will increase. So that is called physiological hypertrophy. Hypertrophy means increase in the size of the cell. So that, whereas in other organs, the increase in size means the number of cells will also increase, whereas in heart, only the size will increase, that is the physiological hypertrophy. Whereas if you have a lot of particulate matters in this one, again that directly enter into the cells. So once the cardiomyocytes, if it is killed, then it will not be made. So during the air pollution and also in other cardiovascular diseases, the cells will be, if the cells undergo apoptosis, then that means you have to negate or minus the cells. So that means the number of cells will increase when you have the disease. Otherwise, if you are healthy, the same number of cells you have from birth or day after birth until you die. So this is a very common aspect of the heart. Okay, fine. So the other diseases, apart from the infectious diseases or communicable diseases, the mental health. So the mental health, again, you have stress, anxiety, all those things. So generally, these all three are interconnected. So if you have a medical, there's a very good relationship between these three. If you have medical and physical health, yes, then you feel very bad, and then you mentally that will affect you. And if you then like ultimately leads to the community health. So these three, or all three, are interrelated, and they have very good relationship. So the medical, physical health, and mental health and community health are interrelated. Say, for example, now these are some of the data during 80s and 90s. The extreme climate or weather events which happen in different parts of the world, and the morbidity and mortality. So, for example, like in Africa, almost there are 243 events, like all sort of like hurricane, tsunami, landslide, and this and that. So many things. A drought or excessive rain, downpour, all those things. So it killed almost in 90s 417,000 people, and the affected peoples are in millions. So that means around 138 million peoples were affected because in Africa during 80s, whereas in 90s around 104 million people were affected. Then again in Europe, like these are the 66 calamities. And you can see Southeast Asia, because we belong to Southeast Asia, there were 242 events, and 850 million people were affected because of different climate and weather-related events during 1980s. And during 1990s, it was around 427 million people. Whereas in Western Pacific, the number is increased tremendously during 1990s. So totally, if you compare the 80s and during 90s, there is again 500,000 more 500 million peoples were affected during 1990s if you compare to 1980s. Okay, so generally the change in the climate, again, it will affect the environment, and finally it will eventually affect the health of the people. So now we are in that situation, that is, the climate is keep on changing, and because of the environmental is changing, and we are having a lot of health issues, and especially now at present, because since this is virtual meeting because of the COVID-19. So the COVID-19, again, we have to infecting people, but because now we are safe, but we do not know what would happen, but what in US and other developed countries. So now the wave again started, they are saying that is a tsunami-like increase in the number of infections. Okay, that's what we are expecting, that during December it might increase similar to other countries. So we have to protect the environment, or we have to do something to protect our environment as a responsible human beings in this world, which is providing life to us. But there are a lot of damage has been done to the Mother Earth, and because of this, there's a lot of changes. So we have to adapt to this. So what you have to do is what to do at present. So you have to do adapt, and adopt. So adapt means good at doing something difficult. Yes, now we have to wear masks all the time, right? because we never used to do it. But no other go, we had to use the mask, and we had to wash the hands very frequently, or whenever we touch the human handling places, we have to keep washing our hands, right? And social distancing, because social distancing is a very difficult part in India, because we are socialized animals. Because so keeping social distance is very difficult for us, but still, but no other go. So you have to adapt. That means you have to do something which is difficult. And another thing is you have to adapt. That means you have to change for a new situation or purpose. Yes, now the situation is changed. For that one, you have to change yourself to adapt and adopt. Adopt means to legally take something as your own. But yes, these are the changes which are happening here, and I have to take and I have to follow this. So, like wearing mask and keeping social distancing and frequent washing your hands. So these are the things you have to remember. So this is the one which, now everything is in your hand, because in 2020, again the climate change is in our hand, and we have to do something to avoid the climate change by protecting our environment. And I thank you very much. So keep yourself, family, friends, and the community safe by keeping the environment safe. Thank you very much. And I'm ready to take your questions.